Welcome back to the daily Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Living Jewish class. We are continuing with the laws of interest, touching on the final discussion. So, just briefly, we spoke about the importance of interest and many other scenarios of interest, extensions of loans, gifts in advance, other forms of benefit from the borrower. And then we spoke about lending produce and the issues involved relating to that. Payment plans, delayed payment, advance payment, investment, business ventures we spoke about yesterday. And today, finally, we'll discuss loans with Jews and non-Jews. We'll see how that could get quite complicated, but we'll try to focus on the primary points. So the Torah permits the borrower. Here's a few pointers before we start. The Torah permits the borrower from and lending to a non-Jew for interest. The sages, however, limited the collection of interest from a Gentile to the amount necessary to earn a livelihood, meaning you shouldn't abuse it. So again, legally, there's nothing wrong with charging interest for a loan. You're not forcing the person to take the loan. You're saying the money is fine. If you want to use it, then I'm going to charge you a fee. And so this is allowed between Jew and non-Jew in moderation to earn a living, but not more than that. Now, that's the first point that's worth knowing, that the prohibition of interest is only between Jew and Jew. Second point is that there are two kinds of aiders or co-signers or guarantors. The first type of co-signer is when the arrangement is that the lender would need to first approach the borrower to collect his debt. And in the event that the borrower cannot pay, then and only then may he demand payment from the RA, from the guarantor, from the co-signer. In this situation, the original recipient of the money from the lender is considered the borrower, regardless who pays in the end. Okay, let me just spell that out. If I wanted to borrow money from Reb Moshe, and Reb Moshe asked me to have a co-signer, a guarantor, asked John if he could sit in on it, and he said sure. And so I borrowed 100 rand. Then Reb Moshe comes to me to ask me for the 100 rand, and I say to him, you know what? Why don't you go to John, because he signed on the loan. So there's two possibilities of how John would have signed. If he signed to be a backup, that if I am not able to come up with the funds, then Reb Moshe could go to him. So in such an instance, even if he ends up paying, that doesn't turn him into the borrower. I was the borrower, and he was just giving security. That's the one type of co-signer, the one type of guarantor. The other type of guarantor is where the lender retains the option to demand payment from either the RA or the borrower, whoever he decides to approach first. If he collects from the RA, then the RA has the right to be reimbursed from the borrower. Here, the borrower is considered to have borrowed from the RA. It is as if the RA borrowed the money from the lender and then proceeded to lend that money to the borrower. So the second scenario, if I ask Reb Moshe for 100 rand, Reb Moshe says, who's your guarantor? And I say that it's John. But the nature of the agreement is that Reb Moshe doesn't need to come to me for the money. You could go straight to John, and then John could come back to me and ask me to pay him for what he paid back to Reb Moshe. So in this scenario, it's considered like there were two loans in place. The first loan was from me I borrowed money from Reb Moshe, and the second is that John ended up actually borrowing money from me, meaning he paid back lending money to me. Okay, I'm a little confused, but the point is that the latter of the two, the lender can go to either the borrower or the guarantor, whoever he wishes. In the first scenario, the lender can only go to the borrower, and only if the borrower cannot furnish the funds, then he goes to the guarantor. Why is all of this relevant? Because when we talk about charging interest between Jew and non-Jew, and there's a Jew involved as the guarantor, So the question is there now an issue of interest between Jew and Jew? So we're going to give a couple of scenarios. There's actually 7 halachas on this. I was hoping to close it up by the end of the week, but due to our technical difficulties in starting the class today, I'm not sure if we'll be able to do that, but let's try to give it a bash. So here's the first scenario. A Jew may borrow from a Gentile with interest, okay, with another Jew as an Arab under the following conditions. Okay, so if I want to go borrow money from a non-Jewish bank, from Johan, and Johan's going to charge me interest for the loan, and he wants a guarantor, so I am allowed to take another Jew, I'm allowed to take whoever it is, I'm allowed to take Gerald as my guarantor for the loan that I'm borrowing from Johan. But it needs to be of such that the Johan will have to first demand payment from me, and only if it is impossible for him to collect the funds from me, then he could go to Gerald. So it's only this type of Arab that would be allowed. But if the terms of the loan are such that the Gentile may first demand payment from the Arab, so Johan can go straight to Gerald. He doesn't need to come to me first. Then it's as if the Arab, as if Gerald borrowed money from the non-Jew and then lent it to me. It's as if he's like a middleman. Since the Johan is able to collect straight from Gerald, so it's as if Gerald is a middleman between me and the non-Jew. Now, what's the problem with that? It's as if the Arab borrowed money from the Gentile, then lent it to the Jewish borrower, and it wouldn't be allowed because there's interest involved. So it's as if Gerald borrowed money from Johan at an interest rate, and then lent that same money to me at an interest rate, and then there's a problem of interest. Similarly, if a non-Jew borrowed from a Jew with interest, okay, so now Johan is borrowing money from me, and another Jew stands in as a guarantor, as an Arab for Johan, then if the terms of the loan are such that the lender must first demand payment from the non-Jew, and only when he does not find satisfaction from the non-Jew, from Johan, if the terms are that I have to first collect payment from Johan, and only if he doesn't have, then I could go to Gerald, then it's allowed. Because then it means the loan is just between me and the non-Jew. And so the fact that this interest is not a problem. But if the terms of the loan are such that I can initially demand payment from the Jew, from Gerald, then it's like the Arab is the borrower from me, and then there would be a problem of interest. However, if the Jew co-signs only for the principal and not for the interest, then it's allowed. So here's another solution. If I wanted to borrow money from Johan and I wanted to use somebody as a guarantor, and Johan said, no, I want to be able to collect from whomever I wish, then what I could do is I could make that guarantor only on the principal and not on the interest. And that way there would be no interest between Jew and Jew. Okay, let's leave these brackets. Second scenario, when a non-Jew says to a Jew, borrow money on interest for me from a Jew with this collateral. Okay, so Johan wants to borrow money from John, and Johan comes to me and says, can I approach John to collect a loan on Johan's behalf? So then it depends again on the arrangements. If I'm just a middleman and I have no legal responsibility, then that's fine. Even though there's interest involved, the interest is just between Jew and non-Jew. But if in any way I get personal benefits or responsibility in being the middleman, then it's as if I'm now charging interest to the Jew, in which case there would be a problem of ribis. So in other words, the intermediary needs to have no legal responsibility in order for it to be allowed. So for a Jew to act as intermediary between a loan between a Jew and a non-Jew, he needs to act only as an agent and he can't have any personal responsibility. Otherwise, there would be a problem of interest between Jew and Jew. Similarly, a Jew who gave collateral or promissory note to a fellow Jew to borrow money on interest for him from a non-Jew on the collateral or note, it's allowed. If the Gentile relies solely on the collateral or the note, and the intermediary assumes no responsibility. Okay, another scenario where the intermediary can't take responsibility. Similarly, if at first the Jew lent money to a fellow Jew on collateral, and afterwards the borrower said to the lender, borrow money from a Gentile on interest using this collateral, and I'll be obligated to pay the Gentile the principal and the interest. If the Gentile depends solely on the collateral, then it's permitted, as long as the interest is only between Jew and non-Jew and not between Jew and Jew. Next scenario, if a Jew lent money to a non-Jew on collateral for a certain rate. Okay, you know what? I'm going to let you read the rest of these halachas at your convenience, because I would like to move on to a new topic, please God, next week. And we have reached time due to the delayed start, due to unforeseen circumstances. Thanks so much for joining. Wishing you a good